Just so you know how much we care about you, we did do 5 minutes and had to start over because I was talking into the tin can microphone, trying to be better at that, still learning this new program that we have. But Wednesday, March 4th, around 8:30, 6:30 Mountain Time, I am joined with Coach Holmes, and we have an action-packed episode here for you. But first and foremost, do want to say this. Big news out of the NL East. We got Jordan Profar. Is it Jordan? Jordan Profar?
Jurickson
Profar is out for the year for the Atlanta Braves.
Playing for Team
PEDs.
Netherlands, though, in the World Baseball Classic still, though.
So he is out for the season. New York Mets beat up on Team Israel today. We'll leave that at that. And what an awesome time. Baseball's right around the corner. Hokey ball's off to a little bit of a rough start, which has been tough. But Coach, how you doing, man? I'll ask you again.
Yeah, doing great. Baseball is full swing in the Holmes household. My son's 13U team, which I coach, has started up. We had our first official practice yesterday. We've been doing some off-season stuff, and then Castleview High School, the team that I assist with, we have had some scrimmages, but our first game is tomorrow afternoon. So getting excited to kick off that season.
Looking forward to that. And a couple of other things that I wanted to mention. Basketball team, huge game against UVA coming up. Basically the determination on if we will be dancing in March or if we will not. If you are local and you can make it, please try to get out there. A couple of other housekeeping items. We're headed to Montana tomorrow, going to ski Big Sky. Never been. Really looking forward to that. I got a lot of packing in front of me the rest of tonight, and I did take up golf. So got my father's irons that he had when he was at Ole Miss in 1985 regripped. I did go ahead, bite the bullet, get a new bag, got a new driver. So any tips, any suggestions that you have on just starting golf, I am open and ready to hear anything that you all have. What we have in store for the episode today. So, first and foremost, a lot has happened. This is going to be a football-focused episode. We are going to break down the Set in Stone video, which I'll link in the description, which was basically this awesome series that Virginia Tech is doing with an inside look at the program. We're also going to talk about Coach Franklin's appearance on Tech Sideline. I'll link that as well. Fantastic. They had him for about 30 minutes. And we're also going to talk about general things going on around the football program as well. So that's what we will talk about. Let me say this before I pass it to you, Coach Holmes. Coach Franklin said that it's important for our program to look big time. And at face value, you might hear these comments and be like, we're talking about social media. Like everything that has come out, we haven't played a football game, but everything that has come out and the attention to detail with everything about the staff, recruiting, letting you know that they're out recruiting, the focus on the players, peeling back the onion, giving media access to weight room sessions, giving media access to meeting the assistant coaches, conversing with the assistant coaches. I saw Coach Franklin on a Maryland radio podcast today, talking about his time living in Olney, coaching at Maryland, talking about the staff, talking about his excitement. Obviously, the spring game promotional wheel has been flying. So I just wanted to say before we started this conversation that they have done a phenomenal job of making this program, I guess the word is accessible. And when you make a program accessible, it is when you open yourself up to more people parting with dollars to support the regime that you have. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think it's a great job of just, again, like you said, just opening the doors so the people who are donating the money, the people who are helping to fund the program from the outside can see where their money is being spent. I think in the past, it's really been really closed off behind closed doors. That's like, here, let me give you thousands of dollars of my money and just really hope it goes where you're telling me it's going. And so now you're seeing the fruits of that investment, first and foremost, which I think is just a great thing. Like the first episode was how Coach Franklin got here and that story, which has been, told ad nauseum. The second story of how Coach Pry came back and all of that was great. Great, just, great storytelling in general. But this third episode really was about the veteran buy-in, getting guys like Kamari Copeland and Aiden Green getting them focusing on those guys. And not only that, they were obviously key players from last year's team. They're seniors. They chose to stay. They could have gone into the portal and chased a bag and gone elsewhere. They chose to stay at Virginia Tech. They chose to be a part of this rebuilding process and chose to stay with Coach Franklin for a reason. And they made them focal points of this set in stone volume 3. They talked about specifically the strength and conditioning program, the off-season workouts. They brought Chuck Losey in, and he's completely revamped in a way. Some of the elements that Coach Pry brought in the previous regime obviously were brought over from Penn State. The hunger drills and everything else that they were doing. That competition element, of course, is obviously going to still be there. It looks like they've ramped it up. I love the fact that literally everything they're doing is involving some sort of competition. The tug of war with the tire pull, there seems like there's a sense of urgency literally in everything that they're doing. And it's not a desperate thing. It's just urgency. Like, hey, listen, we want to win now. And it's not something we want to win 2-3 years down the road. We feel like we have the roster in place where in the ACC we can win and compete now. So that is why we have the urgency that we're putting forth right now in the offseason. So everyone in the building is getting that buy-in, and you see it from the coaching staff. You see it from the strength staff. You see it from literally everyone in the building. That's that culture shift that was so sorely needed that we as Hokie fans have been aching for years and years and years. So when you see on the sweatshirts and the t-shirts that say reestablished 2026, and you see guys like that, was it Caton, whatever that guy's name, that idiot podcaster that's way
Oh, the Barstool guy, yeah.
Yeah, is he? I don't think is he a Barstool guy? But that's constantly trashing James Franklin. I don't know, but he must have some type of personal vendetta. But he basically said that, like, oh, he's going there. That's an insult to the legacy of Frank. It's not. This is a complete misunderstanding of the term reestablished. And they went into that. I'll let you talk about that when you talk about the Tech sideline interview. But he went into that in that interview. The term reestablished is basically saying, hey, the level of respect that this school garnered for almost 25 years, that when you stepped foot into Lane Stadium, Worsham Field, where you stepped foot in the stadium, then you'd turn around and go back to the locker room and drain yourself. We're getting that back. That's the reestablishment part. It has nothing to do with forgetting about the past. It's wanting to get back to that era. And that's the reestablishment part. So I think that's very important that we as Hokie fans say, hey, we're not trying to forget about what happened, that we're starting over from scratch. We're getting back to what made this place the thing that we all fell in love with, that not necessarily we forgot about, but we're getting back to it. And that's that we're setting those bedrocks. That's what the set in stone is all meant to be.
Couple of things. You're talking about that ass clown Carton, who is a felon and is just constantly talking about Virginia Tech. That guy is an actual terrorist. So that's number one. Number two, when you talk about reestablished, we've said it on this podcast many times. Virginia Tech basically went from Terror Dome to Metallica, and that was kind of it. Like the entrance was the football program for the better, 2000 for the exception of 2016, basically all the way back to 2012. So I'm all for it. I don't think that it's a massive deal, too. It's no different than putting a sign on the wall in your facility. It's ultimately, if it resonates with the players, that's what's supposed to matter. I think it's resonated very well with Virginia Tech fans when you're seeing it from the outside. Maybe it's going a different way, but that doesn't matter. So I don't put too much stock into that. Now, I do want to mention, if you are interested in hearing about the coaching availability, check out the Too Deep podcast. It'll be on this feed right around or right before when this podcast goes out. They're having Ryan Castle on. He got to speak with Coach Chaos, Coach O'Brien, all of the assistants. So I strongly encourage you to check out that episode. We're going to focus on the Tech Sideline podcast. And the first thing that I want to say, and I can't remember if it was David or Andy or Teal mentioned this on their podcast today. Everything that he does, media availability, standing at a basketball game and taking in the basketball game, anytime he speaks publicly, he is buttoned up and he is a massive, massive presence. I make this comparison that it makes sense in my brain. I don't know if it makes sense to other people. Coach Franklin is as close as you can get to like a celebrity when it comes to college football. Like he is a commanding presence.
Well deserved.
Anytime that you talk him, 100%. So number one, I want to give my kudos to Tech Sideline and everybody who's interviewed him. And I want to give my kudos to him because we're talking about set in stone. It seems like this staff has left no stone unturned. What I also noticed was he mentioned a couple of times how, and I've said on this podcast, how Coach Franklin misses nothing. This staff, and some people may think it's distractive. I don't think it is, because I think Virginia Tech fans and every fan base has had issues where it's like, is our administration, is our coaching staff, is our team tone deaf? Like, do you not understand like the conversations going around? And to one matter, that doesn't matter when you're on the field, on Thursdays, Fridays, or Saturdays in the fall. But it does matter when you're trying to fundraise. It does matter when you're trying to get 66,000 people to go to the spring game. So he even mentioned like there were several avenues that he went down where that he broached that subject because he had seen it been a conversation point. One of those was Jimmy Sexton. He for lack of better terms, he kind of smoothed it over and said, hey, look, everybody was talking about Jimmy Sexton and this was this big seance, and it wasn't. We had one conversation about this, and there were a couple other that I can't think off of the top of my head. We'll get into another one here in a minute, but he sees and responds to everything that goes on in his program. And for the last couple of years, when you think about, we haven't heard from so-and-so in so long, this has been a problem for for the last 10 years. Why has it not been addressed? He is totally in tune with that and addresses it at every motion that he gets. So I think that that's huge.
Yeah, it's malfeasance if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Really and truly, if you don't have, and it's not necessarily getting your hands involved in everything, but if you're not aware of what's going on, everything around your program, at least from a 1,000-foot view, then you're not doing justice to your program and the people that support it.
I don't mean to be Colin Cowherd for the second time on this podcast, but I will go ahead and do it. Coach Franklin is the CEO and in many ways an extension of or the head of the athletic department. That's no disrespect to Whit or the administration. It's just when you bring in a person of this caliber and this understanding, he is going to elevate your entire program. When you think of CEOs who are tone deaf, I mean, you could pull up, the guy's a genius, but you can pull up any interview of Sam Altman and you leave that interview with Sam Altman like, are you aware of any of the conversations that are going on in the world, or are you aware of how your answer may sound when it runs with whoever you're being interviewed by? So I would make that kind of comparison when we're talking about a CEO. The other thing that I want to mention, and this goes hand in hand with the athletic department, is Penn State fans, in the many messages that they sent to Virginia Tech, were saying, oh man, like he's just going to complain and he's going to whine and he's going to push and he's going to ask. I got to tell you, I have no problem with it. Like the fact, we talked about it with the indoor facility a while back, and he, rightfully so, when I say, oh man, like he's saying that indoor needs to get HVAC, I'm not saying that in a way of like, oh, this guy's so high maintenance. I'm saying that we have been saying this for a decade and no one has ever made it a big deal, and he's making it a big deal, and that got fixed immediately. So with this podcast, it was the football only facility, and they asked him about it, and he said, that's not 100% true. Now, the reason for that is because Merriman it's a little weird. It's like a 2-level facility. So if you walk in on the top, it's all football stuff. And if you walk in on the bottom, there's wrestling, baseball, lacrosse, all of the other sports. But he did go on to add 3 pieces of context, again, being able to speak to situations to the fans. And he said, number one, he goes, very similar to HVAC, he goes, I don't know of another program, or we're one of maybe 3 programs in all of America that don't have a football only facility. Like basically presenting you with a fact that supports his action. So
Yes.
when I kind of giggle about that, I'm giggling about it because it's like, wow, somebody finally has the cojones to come in here and be like, we got to get this right. And I've said from jump, if Coach Franklin coaches here until he retires, or Coach Franklin coaches here for 5 years, this is the kind of stuff that sets Virginia Tech up to be successful whenever this tenure comes to an end. Hope he coaches here forever is my opinion, having watching him coach no games.
Yes.
He also mentioned after the Miami game that Miami fans were just walking around in the facility. He mentioned that during a basketball game, there were Virginia Tech fans just walking around their office. Now, he's not saying that in a way of like, oh, we want to be closed off. We don't want the fans to be able to see our facility. There is zero benefit to having other fans of other schools or I don't mean to what school did we play when he was announced? Bryant basketball fans using the bathroom that the GAs are using in the football facility. That is for lack
Yes.
of better terms, that's the opposite of big time. That is as little time as it gets. The fact that
Yes.
you could just walk into the football facility had a nice small town feel. Maybe we just leave that to the stadium so you can run stadiums as a student. We don't need to be going in and out of the indoor facility, the football facility. Did you have any thoughts on that or any additions to that?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you when Coach Beamer was here, I used to go to the coaching clinics up at Virginia Tech. It was, you walked into Merriman, and literally this is before you even scanned the door. There was always a door unlocked.
Mm-hmm.
Always anyone can just walk in at any time, and they would let you in pretty much anywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing you did when you checked in, before you even got your badge or whatever, they sent you downstairs and you got your fill of the excess clothing inventory. So all the gear that didn't get used that last year, they gave you like a 50% discount or whatever, for whatever you wanted to buy. But but walking through the entire facility, you can walk in and out and down. You could walk into
Yep.
Castle. You can walk onto the floor. You could go anywhere. There was no security. There's no barricades. No nothing. Um, I've personally walked through, and I did not play football at Virginia Tech. I've walked through the tunnel many, many times. That should be
Mm-hmm.
something that's reserved for very special people, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
felt lucky that I've been able to do that.
It's it again, and especially now in this I refrain to say culture, but this time, like, it is a security issue, and there's no reason that you should be able to do that, especially when it's a multi-million-dollar operation that's going on. And some people may roll their eyes when he says that, but I completely agree. I mean, I remember when I played at Tech, you would be walking like out of the facility after you finished and you'd round a corner. And if you've been in the facility, you know how this goes. You walk in the front door, you walk down a hallway, and then all the coaches' offices are there. And there are
Mhm.
people like taking pictures of like the offices and people taking pictures of like in front of like the elevator art and stuff. And it's like, hey, like we can do an open house, but there's no reason big time
Yeah.
programs aren't doing that. When I was gallivanting around the country, um, during COVID, I used to like stop at these different schools. And I remember like there were some schools, man, I won't put them on blast here, but some Power Five schools where you just walk right into the president's box in the football facility. The difference was most of those were in very small towns. Granted, now that I think about it, with coaches that aren't there anymore. So I'm glad that they've made a couple of those changes.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what facility is locked up is the University of Iowa. There is not a single door open at Iowa or Nebraska. I did try both.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you too, right after I would go to Virginia Tech, usually the following week was South Carolina's. And South Carolina's this was when Spurrier was there,
Mm-hmm.
completely sealed up. I
Yep.
mean, you cannot go anywhere. And this was,
No.
Spurrier left absolutely nothing to chance.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't
Mm-hmm.
want anybody seeing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just something to be said for that.
Another quote that I'll call out here was he mentioned he was talking about his relationship with Coach Pry, and he said, "I wish I had asked a couple of additional questions." Now, there's two ways to look at that. I think that that's another just example of correctly applying pressure to get the facilities and everything to where they need to be. We've been behind for years. We've talked about it forever. Like, we want to be as good as we want to be. We have to put our foot forward on that. I don't want to put any words in his mouth, but I just kind of thought about maybe some of the things that, like, if you had to think about what were some of those additional questions, because anytime a coach takes a job, they're maybe getting 5 minutes to look at a facility and whatnot, or maybe looking at it online. He said that he actually did fly in over Halloween weekend and drove around in a car with tinted windows and checked out campus. You know, it doesn't really make sense to say, like, yeah, he's probably mad about this, but if you were to say, like, what are the things that need to take the biggest step forward, some of those things to me are the things that he's mentioning. I do think that football should have a football only facility, or at a bare minimum, a football only floor where nobody else is occupying that space. I guess this is an entire podcast, so maybe it doesn't make sense to dive into this, but if you had to guess, like, what are some things that would stand out to you? I'm excited to ask him this, but, like, what are some of the things that you think immediately need to change over the next 3 or 4 years?
I think what's the uniform situation like?
Yeah, that thing.
Not, it sounds trivial, but if we need it, how quickly can we get it? What's the school's relationship with Nike like? Penn State has a really, really good one. So if they needed something, they could get it. Plus theirs is a stock royal blue or navy blue, so it's probably pretty easy for them to get. So, but it was also probably like, hey, it's honestly, it's probably kind of more vanilla stuff that you really don't necessarily think about, that once you actually get boots on the ground, it's stuff that you think about, you think about later on, hey, how hard was it to get stuff done with the building, building people.
Here's one for you. How easy is it to get a guy in if they're not an absolutely awful student based upon credits? We've seen this be an issue with basketball. We've seen this be an issue with football before, where really good players wanted to play at Virginia Tech and they don't end up at Virginia Tech. Again,
well, it just happened this cycle.
Yeah. So again, if you want to be and take advantage of the biggest brand that your university has to offer, which is football, that needs to not just be the 20 or 30 coaches that are on staff and they're fighting a war against everybody else to get done what they need to get done. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what he has to say about that. The other thing that I'll call out is he just seems, you can see why he has such a good relationship with his players, whether it's while they're in the program or after they've been through the program. He mentioned the 3-deep conversation that he had with his team, and basically he said it in front of everybody. He said, hey, look, like, do you guys feel like you have 3 players at every position that can go out and win a football game? And getting an answer to that question and being like, all right, then we need to bring in competition to make this team better. And look, I have 2 experiences with 2 coaches. I enjoyed both experiences, but when I talk to other people at other programs, there are a lot of coaches who do lie and who do say things that are outwardly not true, or are super egomaniacs, or are super, just, there's a bunch of different types of personalities, and you can call Coach Franklin what you want, but I'm going to default to what his players say about him, what his alumni say about him, and what the people that work with him say about him. And it just comes across as, number 1, everybody's on the same page. Number 2, everybody's focused on what they need to do. And number 3, he's going to be honest with you. Whether you like that or don't like that, I think that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's really, everything's on the surface with him. It seems to be.
Any last things just from the Virginia Tech sphere before we move on to, here's one. PB pointed this out in a tweet. He said the new rosters came out, and not the depth chart, but the roster. And he said the current football roster has 11 offensive linemen at 310 pounds or more. VT has only had double-digit 310-pound O-linemen one other time in its history. It was 2020, where Khalil Herbert broke the school record for yards per carry, 1,182 yards on 154 attempts for a 7.7 yards per attempt. I got to tell you, man, this is the direction that college football is moving in. It's the direction that the NFL is moving in. I believe, if I heard this correctly, I was listening to um, Russillo or Rich Eisen, and they said every single year it seems that the overall weight of offensive and defensive linemen just is jumping at an astronomical rate, like 2 to 3 pounds every single year.
Mhm.
So for so many years, when Virginia Tech trots a football team out there, we look small and we look undersized. And listening to Coach Chaos and listening to Coach Losi talk about the importance of pop at the line of scrimmage, talk about the importance of moving other human beings, that's how you're going to do it with bigger
Yes.
people. So I thought that's a great sign of things to come.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that they're, big fat guys. These guys can
Mm-hmm.
move. They're and you saw it if you I don't know how much of the combine you watch. I love watching the combine. Like if I'll watch the replays at night and just watch
Mm-hmm.
the, especially when the linemen start moving and you got guys that are 6'9", 350 pounds that are running sub 5'4" 40s.
Yeah,
Like
insane.
these, it's nuts how big
Mm-hmm.
and fast these guys are. But that's what you're right. That's what everybody's trending to. You got to have good feet. You got to have quick feet, and your 10-yard sprint, your 10-yard time is almost more important than your total 40 because how many linemen are sprinting 40 yards? And your overall body mass, because if you have the wider, think about this, and you know this too, being a lineman, I coach linemen, the wider you are and you got a 2-foot split and
Mm-hmm.
you're and now you're a whole 6 inches wider on each side. Think about how wide you are, off on either side of the ball. You're spreading that defense out all that more on either side of the ball. It just gives you that much more of an advantage.
We talk a lot about, and rightfully so, Kurt Signetti, and we talk a lot about Mendoza and what they did at Indiana. I'll raise you this. The biggest difference was Indiana was just better than everybody else was up front by a wide margin. And the reason that they played against Miami was better than everybody else up front by a wide margin. The two
Yes.
teams, in my opinion, that had the best front seven were the two teams that played for a national championship. So, yeah, you can have as many playmakers as you want. You can have 5 fast wide receivers. You can have dynamic running backs. You can have a quarterback with every tool in the bag. But ultimately, if you can't win up front, you can't win a football game. So, and on that note, Hokies FB put out a video of Kamari Copeland squatting 4 reps, 675 pounds.
Mm.
I have not had a jaw. The guy that was like that when I was at school was Wyatt Teller. Where he would just do stuff and everybody's working hard and everything else, but you can't really beat genetics. And Wyatt Teller was a genetic freak, and Kamari Copeland is in that same category. I cannot wait to watch this guy play football. Ryan Castle got a video of him just throwing around 220. I think it was 225 or 285 on a power clean, like it was just the bar. I mean, this guy's special, man. I think he's been a guy that's kind of flown under the radar a little bit, and I think that has to do a little bit with how successful Tech has not been over the last couple of years. But you want to talk about a guy that you can kind of hang your hat on, who's going to
Yep.
be a problem next year, it's Kamari Copeland.
Well, and he's going to be that guy too, that if we can put those wins together where we can get to
Mm-hmm.
that 8 and 9 win total in this year, which is going to be his senior year, and he gets that combine invite, he's that guy that's going to blow up the combine.
Yeah.
And he's going to be that guy that could be that, late first round, early second round guy that is
Mm-hmm.
just going to be able to be a long time plug. He honestly, you're a newly adopted Panthers fan, but he plays a lot like Derek Brown in the middle. He gets long
Mm-hmm.
arms and he gets extended in the middle, and you really like to see guys like that. And he's just strong as a damn ox, man. He's just, I just 675 for reps is just, it's unfathomable. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's man. That's
It's crazy to
huge.
think that what an unbelievable scouting job by Jeff Munkin and the military academy. I mean, just an unbelievable job.
Yeah.
That's where he started, right? He started at Army,
Was
correct?
well, I thought he was at Oklahoma. Was
No, Gilliam was at Oklahoma. I can't remember.
Gilliam
I
was at
think
Oklahoma? That's right.
Gilliam was at Oklahoma, and I believe
Yeah.
Kamari Copeland started off at Army. But yeah, I'm excited to watch him play. And before we move on to some like bigger picture college football conversation, do you have anything else on the football program in general?
No, I'm just champing at the bit to get to spring.
Hmm.
Just waiting to see what everything looks like. And it follow some of these guys on their social media
Yeah.
too. They're putting it's quote unquote clinic season
Hmm.
also right now. So some of these guys are giving talks.
Hmm.
If you want a little bit more insight, I've posted some to the group chat. They're giving talks and about some of the stuff that they do in their individual periods, how they train their guys. Danny O'Brien, Coach Chaos, and those guys. So if you are interested, go follow them on their social medias and look them up. They are the stuff they're doing is really ingenious and next level. Just give them a follow.
I'll also mention this on the competition side of things. Embracing competition is so critically important, and I don't want to get into the weeds of what it used to be and what it is now, but um, I guess I can a little bit. When I was at Tech, there was a conscientious effort, not from inside the football building, where competition and like there's a winner and there's a loser was not basically promoted. And I don't mean to promote it to put the loser cap on one guy and the winner cap on the other one, but I'm thinking of this Set in Stone episode 3, where you had, I think it was IBM, and you had Aiden Green going at
Aiden
it.
Green, yeah.
And it seems like such a little thing, but to be promoting an environment that embraces competition is going to make these guys so much better, man. Like we talk about how bringing in talent and good on really good is going to make us better. Embracing that's awesome. And I can't wait to see, man, we put these pads on and you're seeing, Kamari Copeland doing one-on-ones against our offensive line. You're seeing Grunk try to do Skelly against our defensive backs. Like I'm Bill Davis in middle drill. Like I can't wait to see some of that, because from what
Yeah.
we've seen so far, they're going to be showing a little bit of that. And if you don't think that motivates the guys, where it's me versus this guy, and
It's
I
on
want to
tape.
get some of these retweets, that's
Yeah.
going to be making.
Well,
That's going to
also
be
they don't want
breathing.
to be embarrassed on tape either.
No.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be everything they got.
Hmm. So with that, we'll switch gears a little bit to just we could just make this as laid back as you want. I just had a couple of points that I wanted to bring up. One tip of the cap that I want to give is to Bob Chesney. Bob Chesney, former coach at JMU, he went out to UCLA, and I've been kind of following him because Matt Transu worked in the recruiting department at Virginia Tech, and now I think he's the director of player operations, or he's doing something over there. So I've been following UCLA. Bob Chesney's doing a really good job over at UCLA in terms of like, this is a program that had negative amounts of juice, like leaving the Rose Bowl, losing to everybody, going into a conference. Their previous coach had a absolute disaster of a press conference when they were introduced at Big Ten Media Day. You should go
Oof.
back and watch that. That was a tough watch. We're UCLA. We play in Los Angeles. I mean, it was brutal. But man, I just want to tip my cap. He's doing a really good job. That's a tough job to take. It's in a city where if you can get everybody on the same page, it's a desirable location. I saw that he went to dinner with like 8 or 10 high roller dudes out in Los Angeles, one of which was Bill Simmons. I loved to see that too. So I just want to tip my cap to him. Do you have anybody else in this coaching cycle that you feel like is in a good spot or a good fit to where they landed?
I really oh I just I had it and I lost it. Anyway, I'll probably think about it later. No, but
Yeah.
I agree with what Bob Chesney's doing out there too. The whole culture building aspect, learning everybody's name, that viral video that went out.
Oh yeah.
Learning, who's the housekeeping staff, who's the cook, who's the guy that who's serving you your sandwiches every
Hmm.
day. Learning everybody's name. I don't know if you've ever seen the show Shoresy. On Hulu, that actually was a big part of one of the episodes where they're bringing a whole new group of guys together and talking about building the culture. They actually go through and are trying to. They say, learn this guy's name. These are the janitors. Learn their name. This is the ticket taker.
Hmm.
Learn their name. So it's all part of becoming part of this community and building a culture. I think that's a great thing that they're doing.
Wanted to point this out as well. Did you have the school of the guy you were thinking about? I was jazzed to hear who you had on that list.
Um,
SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12. I think
I
Matt
know.
Campbell's honestly going to do a good job at Penn State. I know Penn State
Yeah,
kids are watching.
yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I hate to go back to that, but go back to that well, because everyone thinks that, just because they're bringing all of Iowa State over there, just like, Franklin's bringing most of Penn State down with him. Honestly, I think he's going to be a good, solid guy. I think he was a Big Ten guy that was trapped in the Big 12.
Hmm.
He's got that kind of mentality there. The other guy that I think is really going to surprise a lot of people that Ryan Day better watch out for is Kyle Whittingham. Um,
Mm.
Kyle, that Michigan, and I hate it because I'm, not really the biggest Michigan guy either, but Kyle Whittingham at Michigan is going to surprise a lot of people. If they can get the right quarterback in place and have him not, smoking J's in the locker room, they're going to be all right.
It's interesting because think about the personalities that Michigan just went through. You go from Jim Harbaugh, who I don't want to say Elmer Fudd because he's obviously a football genius, but he's a very goofy individual, right? You go from that to basically Sharon Moore, who had no brand and then destroyed his brand in a day. And now you go to Kyle Whittingham, who is a no-nonsense, you know what you're going to get, you know he's going to maximize the talent on his roster, who probably a lot of people thought were going to ride into the sunset. I think it's crazy if it's true that Utah was kind of like, yeah, we're good. Really crazy move. I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the most. He's like the example of consistency, and that's hard to do in this new era of college football. So it's amazing that the two teams that had the biggest, weirdest meltdown during the coaching search, one by the athletic director and one by the coach's actions, ended up with really good fits in
Yeah.
Michigan and Penn State. So
Yeah.
I will point that out as well. This statistic came out from Isaac Trotter. It's pretty jarring. I'll try to get it up here on the screen, but he said there are only 22 high major scholarship players who will celebrate senior night this week, having played at just one place. Mississippi State's Sean Jones Jr. is the only SEC senior to finish where he started. So he broke down how many kids have stayed at their school for 4 or 5 years. This is the list in college basketball. Big 10 had 10, Big 12 had 5, Big East had 3, ACC had 3, SEC had 1. I don't want to turn this into a large conversation. I saw one quote tweet on it that was basically like, we've gone too far and this is not kind of what you want and what you want to see. I agree with that. I was doing my thing where the calendar turns to March and I type in like the show me all of the March Madness highlights from years and years and years ago, and I came across like some guys that I loved to see at schools for a long time. Aaron Kraft is like the first guy that pops into my mind as a guy that was at Ohio State forever. You think of a Shabazz Napier, a Kemba Walker, like some of these guys who were just mainstays. And now I turned St. John's on, and I've followed St. John's ever since I was a kid. And it's like, man, I wonder who will be on the team next year. So I don't mean to scream into the void and say it's disappointing, but that's kind of just the day and age of college sports that we're in now. Any other big themes or any other things you came across the timeline that grabbed your attention?
No, I think that pretty much covers it all. I'm really excited for March Madness to get going. This is, we're
Yeah.
getting to that period of time after, the ACC tournament. This is, growing up in the Carolinas. This is when the teachers, they all sat down with their coffee and graded papers, and they wheeled the TV in on the cart and just put it on Raycom Sports and just let it go for Thursday and Friday. And so we, those Thursday and Fridays were the days off for everybody. So that was just growing up in the Carolinas, that was always just kind of a neat thing to have. So but again, looking forward to that. Hopefully we can repeat our performance against those sorry ass Wahoos. Get another dub there, and make the dance. And who knows, the ball, even though that ball is round, it bounces crazy ways sometimes.
With that, we will close this out, and we'll be I'm going to put these out as separate YouTube videos. So check it out in the description if you are on YouTube. If you're on podcast, we'll keep it right here. So this is going to be. We are switching gears here. If I can get my mouse to work, we're switching gears here to the Hokey Hitter Chalk Talk. Rave reviews, Coach Holmes. I'm fired up, as you can see on the. You'll see in a second on the screen, that we have made an update to our technology here. And the goal of this really is just we're going to have a lot of analytical conversations, X and O's conversations as the season goes along. And we kind of wanted to take that next step. So we did a breakdown on Coach Franklin's offense that you saw back at Maryland, and some of the schemes and other things that we wanted to see. And we got some responses, and basically, we're going to do an episode of Back to the Basics football. So this is like football 101. When we say A-gap, when we say two-hole, when we say 4-eye, what exactly are we talking about? So that's the questions that we want to answer today. And with that, Coach Holmes, I will pass it over to you.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The purpose of this, again, like as Billy said, football 101. And the goal of this, as fans, as you're watching the game, to know a little bit of what you're talking about. And maybe you played, maybe you didn't, and maybe you just want to know a little bit more, and hopefully this makes you a more educated fan. So when we're talking about it, and this is going to be a series that we do a little bit more going on throughout the year. And before, in the past, I've done the Hokey Hitter, where I've just gone over plays and maybe just given my commentary on it. But now that we have this podcast ability to go along with it, we'll kind of do this with the podcast and be able to kind of break it down a little bit more in little bits. I kind of like that idea. So all right, so let's go. And our last episode, we kind of did more of an offensive theme. We kind of broke down James Franklin's offense and kind of went into some of his elements from previous stops, right? So with this, we're going to kind of give some base elements of what an offensive play call is, right? So let's just talk about formations, just basic formations, right? What I have drawn on the screen here, you can see it. This is just a basic, what we call a twins formation. You're going to have your 5 offensive linemen in the middle, okay? Your center, 2 guards, and 2 tackles, okay? Your 2 split ends on the outside, okay? And your 2 flankers, sometimes they're called slot receivers out here. Quarterback, tailback, okay? You may see us number these or letter these a little differently, okay? You may see us use X and Y for our ends, okay? X's and Y's for our ends here. Those are going to be used. Sometimes our Y, when he comes in tight right here, that Y is usually going to be reserved for our tight end. Okay. Our slots here are usually going to be Z or Z. Sometimes the other one will be H or T or F, or we'll use some type of other letter for that other slot. Okay. This running back here will usually be T or B. Okay. We'll use some other letter to designate what that running back is. Okay. So when we draw these plays up, other than that, you see me draw an O on there when there's no other defense on there. That's why we call it X's and O's, right? So we're just signifying that that's an offensive player. Okay. Now, when we get into motions, right? Motions are either going to start with an R or an L word 90% of the time. Okay. You're going to have Roger or Lucy. You're going to have Rip or Liz. and that keyword is going to determine who moves. Okay. So let's say we have a rip motion. For us, that was a rip motion, always designated that running back was going to go in motion to the right. Okay. So rip meant running back to the right. Obviously, Liz would mean that running back would go in motion to the left. Okay. That would be a pre snap motion. Okay. Sometimes you might see a, so we have this cool feature on this thing, by the way. I hit this button, everything goes away, right? Isn't that kind of cool? All right. So I'll draw my formation back up here. We're just going to use O's for an example. And I'm just going to draw two receivers over here to the left. Now, we may have a, let's say we have a Lucy motion. In this case, Lucy refers to my slot receiver. Okay. And we say Lucy return, right? So that means my slot receiver, Lucy return, right? That means this slot receiver is going to motion in and return, right? So it's going to motion in and then return back to the left. Okay, so there we go. So that's so that designates my return motion. So again, everything that you hear when we say those keywords, it's all designated in the play call. So you might hear, let's draw the whole thing up.
And just for color, Coach, the rule is, now I never went in motion in my life. You can't have two players moving in motion at the same time. You have to have your guys set before somebody else goes in motion.
Correct. You can't have two players go in motion, but they have to be set for 1 second before the snap.
You also cannot be moving towards the line of scrimmage at the snap of a ball. So if somebody is going in motion, they're basically going to have to go in motion east and west. There's no north or south. If you like that stuff, you can watch Canadian football.
Yeah, right. Canadian football, where you can win on a missed field goal. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
If the game is tied and you kick a field goal, even if you miss it and it goes out the back of the end zone, that counts as 1 point.
Oh, wow.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at this formation. So let's say we have twins. Okay. We're designating this twins left because the tailback here is to the left side of the quarterback. So that's how we designate that, twins left. Now, let's take this opportunity to look at our holes. Now, pause. So holes on holes on a football field, all right, on a formation, are usually numbered odd and even, unless you go into the old wing T system, which is so archaic nobody uses it anymore. But in this case, 0 always starts right in the middle. Okay. And then if you go to the right, everything is even. If you go to the left, everything is odd. So this first hole here is the 2 hole. Then you have the 4 hole and the 6 hole, and then everything out here would be 8. Okay. Same thing over here. You have 1, 3, 5, and then they usually don't go to 7. Everything else would be 9 out here. Okay. So, you could have a 7 if you put an extra tight end, or if you added more gaps, you could add a 7 in there, but usually the widest hole is going to be 9. Okay. Anything out to the wide. Okay. So now you have, your hole designation there. So if we have twins left, and let's say we want to run 4 power. Okay. So we say this is the 2 back. So let's say 24 power, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the 2 back here going to the 4 hole. Okay. So, snap the ball. Everybody blocks their assignments. Okay. We block back. Guard pulls through the hole. We hand the ball back to the tailback. He runs through the 4 hole. Okay. So in the simplest terms, without getting into blocking assignments and everything else, that is going to be your standard play call. Now, if you want to get really fun,
keep in mind too that, so just to recap, your motion is dedicated by the R or L word that is assigned to you. Rip or Liz could be for the tight end. Roger or Lucy could be for the X. The other delineation is you mentioned the two. The two is the running back. The one is the quarterback. So if you're running 21 smash, the running back is getting the ball and he's going in the one hole. If you're running, 14 inside zone or 14 keep, that means that the quarterback is taking it into the four hole. So
Yes.
that's basically how that goes.
Yes, correct. So again, and in the simplest terms, and that's just so when we start calling offensive plays or we start talking about offensive plays, hopefully now you have kind of a general idea of what we're talking about. If we say this is 48 power, this is the four back going through the eight hole.
Mhm.
You know what we're talking about there. Or if we say this is jet motion, this is going to be the slot receiver going in jet motion left across the formation. Hopefully every Hokie fan knows what jet motion is.
Mhm.
We went through years of that. But so hopefully you guys know what that is. So because we spent so much time on offense last time, we'll put a pin in the offense and we'll move on to some defensive stuff. And I want you guys to get a taste of the defensive side of the ball because it seems boring because it seems like there's a whole bunch of guys out there that are just there tackling the ball. It's really a lot more than that. And so really want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of that just for a second. So
Real quick, since there's
um,
nothing drawn on the board, let's do a quick quiz. So give me a play call from beginning to end for the offense here. Let's see if the listeners can guess what it is.
okay. So we're going to go. All right. So we're going to go Twins right rip jet 48 power, or excuse me, jet 48 buck.
So let's give it a
So we're going
second.
to go. So we're going to go Twins right rip jet 48 buck. Think about that for a second. So if we go, we'll go ahead and draw it up. So we got Twins. Can you see that on the board? Did everything
I
show up
can,
there?
and I know
Okay.
you said Twins right, so we got to have the running back on the right hand side.
Yep. So Twins right and rip designated what? What did we say that? They designated the running back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's rip motion. So we have Twins right rip. Okay. So that means he's got to go in motion. Okay. So he's going to set up outside. And now we're going to go 48 jet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we designated him the four back ahead of time. I know we said he was the two back earlier, but running backs are weird. They can be two backs. They could be four backs. They could be a lot of different things. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes. But a lot of times we can put him in motion. He'll set up and we run 48 buck coming back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So and then that means we block here, we pin and pull and loop around. And it's actually a really good misdirection play if you really want to get guys because once they see this running back going in motion, you got linebackers that are flowing out the box because they see a whole bunch of stuff going on out there.
One quick delineation. I love watching you get fired up on this stuff. You did say rip. That would have been Liz because the running back was going.
Oh yes, correct.
Was
I'm
going
sorry.
left. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
Sorry. I'm looking at it on two screens, and so I'm looking at it going the opposite way here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my bad on that. Okay, so let's look at some defensive stuff. Okay, so first, play calling basics. When now that we have helmet communications in here, defensive coordinator is going to be on the sideline. He's looking at three different things. He's going to tell that guy in the huddle. He's telling him their formation. He's telling him their blitz and stunts, and then he's telling him the coverage. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so he's telling him when he's telling him the formation, he's basically telling him where they're going to be in either an odd or an even front. Okay, so let's break that down for just a second. In football, even though it seems like there's really more than that, there's really and truly only two types of defensive fronts. There's either an odd front or an even front, and you can add multiple numbers to that. But there's either an odd front, which is going to have some variation of 3 or 5 down linemen. Okay, so let's just start with 3. So we'll have our nose tackle here. And once we actually get these down, we'll start talking about techniques. So we start with 3 down linemen here. Or you could have 5 if you added your linebackers or ends there. Okay, so that's your front. All right, so now let's get into our techniques. I'll make these circles a little bigger. Can we see those good? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Now, techniques on defense isn't an actual move. There are move techniques, but when we say technique on defense, this is where these defensive linemen are lining up. So this is telling them where on the defensive line they are supposed to line up. So and again, just like on the offensive, just like with the holes, we're going to start in the middle. So if you're playing a 0 technique, okay, you are lined up right on the middle of the center. Okay, you are head up on the center. And usually the guy that's doing that, will call him the nose tackle because you are right on his nose. Okay, so you're right on his nose. On either side of that, okay, either side of that, you are playing a 1 technique. Now, sometimes the 1 technique is called the shade. You may hear me call the shade technique on that because they're shading the nose of the center. Okay, so the 1 technique or the shade technique, called the same thing. Okay, now the next technique that you're going to see is a 2. Okay, now it's really weird because the 2 technique actually has one that's a little bit before that. It's called the
Mm-hmm.
2-eye, right? And you're lined up on the 2-eye. You're lined up on the inside or the eye of the guard. Okay. So the 2-eye, you're right there on the eye of the guard. Okay. So you're lined up right there. Now, if I'm head up on the guard, then I am a straight up 2 technique. Okay. So I'm lined up head up on that guard. Now, here's where it gets tricky because if I lined up on the outside of that guard, I'm not a 2-0, right? I'm not a 2-0. I go to my next number. I'm actually a 3 technique there. Okay. So if
The
I am
easiest
in that,
way the easiest way to think about this, at least the way that it worked for me, was for the exception of the 2-eye, the number goes up every shoulder that you go over. So you have
yes,
the head up, you're a 0. A 2-eye is the inside shoulder of that guard. And then a 2 is head up. And then everything after that, you're basically counting up based upon shoulder. So outside
yeah,
shoulder of the guard, you're a 3, inside shoulder of the tackle, and so on and so forth.
yeah, yeah. And then you get 3. And then the next one you get to is going to be a 4-eye, which is going to be the inside shade of the guard, or the
Mm-hmm.
inside eye of the guard there, 4-eye, or the tackle, excuse me. Head up on the tackle is going to be a 4 technique. Outside of him is going to be a 5. If I have a tight end, you can't see my tight end here. But if I have a tight end here, head up on him, going to be a 6. Okay. Anything, you can go all the way out to a wide 9 technique. So if you guys watched the national championship game, you saw Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, and they were playing way out wide the offensive tackles, and they were angled way in. That's called a wide 9 technique, and it's usually designed for pass rushers to help crash the pocket from the outside.
It's designed. It's very limited on what skill set you need to have on your roster to where you're able to actually do that. That just kind of speaks to the spoil of riches that they had. One other thing, and I didn't know if you were going to talk about kind of. There's a little bit of a different type of defense. You'll see teams that either have really good team speed or teams that have a bunch of interchangeable players. It's called radar. So essentially, nobody will line up basically where they're going to actually be lined up, but they're kind of moving around. You'll see
The amoeba.
the amoeba defense where basically nobody has their hand in the ground and it makes it more difficult for guys to know where they go. Best way to combat that is just zone so you can get on your tracks. And I don't want to get too far ahead of a big football conversation, but when you hear a coach say, Man, I had this 3 technique or I had this edge rusher. That's what they're talking about, is basically where they're normally lining up in their base defense.
Yes. So, um, now when um, we get to now, so now that we know what those techniques are, okay, now we can start talking about what the defensive line is going to do when they call this in. So, um, like I said, in an odd front, we can either get into a 3-man front or a 5-man front. So we can kind of lead into that. It could be a 3-4, which means you're going to have 3 down linemen, 4 linebackers. It could be a 3-3, which is going to be 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers. When you usually hear that, that means they're going to be stacked one on top of another. So it means every linebacker is going to be directly behind normally in their alignment, behind the defensive lineman there. You could have a 3-5, which means you're going to have 5 linebackers across, and usually those 5, which is a lot of what Virginia Tech played last year, and those far outside linebackers kind of act as they'll kind of rotate. One of them is going to play down as an extra defensive end, and the other one will kind of play out in coverage a little bit. So you can have multiple variations of that. Sometimes you can have just a straight up old school 5-2. Very similar to kind of what the Buddy Ryan used to play, with a true nose tackle, 2-3 techniques, 2-3 techniques and 2-5 techniques, and just go to town. But you got to have 2 really good middle linebackers in order to be able to do that. So now let's look at an even front. Now, when we say even front, a lot of times you're talking about a 4-man front in modern day football. Very rarely, unless you're in a goal line situation, are you going to see a bare front, a 6-man front. So when we see this, we're either nowadays we're either talking about an over front or an under front. So when you see those signals from the sidelines, you don't really see hand signals anymore because everything is earpiece communicated. But we used to go over for when we called over front, or under. That's how we used to call our 4-man fronts. So let's take a peek at what an over front looks like. Okay. And it all has to do with the strength call of the offense, right? So when we get out there, the first thing they're going to do when they break the huddle, they're looking for the strength of the offense. First thing they're going to look for, is there a tight end on the field? Okay. In this case, yes, there's a tight end on the field. So that's the first trump card to call the strength. So in this case, the defense, they're looking from the other side. So they're going left, left, left. So they know that on the defensive left, there's a tight end. So that's where they're calling their strength to. So on an over call, they're going to put their best defensive lineman towards that tight end. In this case, most teams, their best defensive lineman plays the 3 technique. Okay. So they're going to put that 3 technique, like we said, that's going to be in between the guard and the tackle. Okay. Right there towards the tight end side. That means they're going to put their shade or their 1 technique away from the strength, play their 5, and then usually they'll either play this other defensive end either head up or just outside of that defensive end. Okay. Now, this way, the whole purpose of this is to make sure they have every single run gap covered. Now, the reason that they might put this guy head up here and play a true 6 is that this guy could be a 2-way player. He could play a 2-gap player. It all depends on what this tight end does. If this tight end inside releases, he could squeeze down. If he outside releases, he then might jam him at the line and then play up. So there's multiple things that defensive end could do depending on what that tight end does. We'll talk about that in just a second. But again, we want to make sure that we know what this is. Now, with that same formation, with that strength to the defensive left, let's talk about what an underfront is. Now, let's say they have a tendency. Let's say every time they put a tight end in, they want to run away from them because they say, okay, every time we do this, the defense overloads to the tight end side. We're going to try to be sneaky and we're going to run to the weak side. Okay. We're going to run an underfront here. All right. So now that means all we're doing is putting our 3 technique to the weak side of that line. So now we're putting our 3 technique here to the weak side, our 5 technique, our shade to the strength here, and then now we're putting our 6 technique or our end over here to that tight end side of the field. Now, if you're looking at this, you're saying, "Oh man, Coach Holmes, man, you're leaving a big gap open right here." Guess what we're doing? We're making sure that we have a strong side linebacker or Sam linebacker that's going to be right there. Is going to be able to plug that gap, hopefully. Okay, that's going to have that gap responsibility. But again, that's the difference between over front and under front. So when you see that, things can change. Now, also in an even front, you may see what's called a neutral front, where you have two eyes, and very simply, and you normally see this when there's 4 or 5 receivers wide, and you have two eyes and 2 defensive ends, and they're just playing, and they're kind of playing everything straight up and neutral. They're not giving any strength away on the defensive front. And so we would call this a neutral front, and we would just say, hey, play straight up. And so and a lot of times this is a way that you can't really tip the offense one way or the other where you're going to go. So again, over under there. So while I got this up here, I'll leave this up here. We'll start getting into the next thing that they're going to talk about, which are just kind of your basic stunts, right? I loved running games with the defensive line. I always thought it was a lot of fun. It gave the defensive line something to do other than just pin their ears back and go. So, and there's always kind of fun names that you can give them depending on what they're going to do. You could call them eat, you could call them toe, you could call them taco, you can call them all kinds of stuff. But it usually gave you a clue. So if we went neutral eat, then we would give like a cover 4. We would give some type of coverage back behind it when we were calling this defense in. So let's say eat. What does that mean? Eat. EAT. End and tackle, right? End and tackle. End comes first, tackle goes second. It's all in the name, right? So if we have this laid out right here, we have our end and our tackle. So what we're doing is telling him basically to switch jobs, switch roles. Our tackle is now going to become the edge rusher, and our end is coming inside. But our end has to crash first. So our end crashes inside hard, and then our tackle is going to loop around him. Why do we do this? We're hoping that this tackle is going to follow him and then basically leave this guy unmanned. As an offensive lineman, we're hoping that we teach them well enough that we can pass that guy off, because we realize, hey, if somebody leaves you, somebody else is coming, right? But if you turn your shoulders and you follow that guy, now you've left. You see it in the highlights all the time. We lookout blocks, right? You leave your quarterback wide open and they get plowed in the backfield. But that is the eat. Okay. All right. Eat. Now, if we called toe, which would we would kick first, that is TOE, tackle over end, right? Or tackle over end. That means our tackle, we'll draw that one on the other side. Okay. Our tackle, okay, goes first, and he crosses face through the end, and then our end loops around to the inside. Okay. So you can draw those stunts, multiple different ways. Okay. You can do a bat where the backer and the tackle will cross. You can do what do we had all kinds of names for all of them, where you get the Will linebacker and the Sam linebacker involved and all kinds of stuff, and they all had code names. And that's it. But those are stunts, stunts and blitzes that these packages that you can have when you get your linebackers and defensive line involved. All tricks and all games to be able to go get the quarterback. Okay,
Hmm.
but that would all be involved in that initial play call. Now, all right. Do you have any questions about that or anything you wanted to add on those?
No, I would just say you'll hear people use the word game too. So there's stunts, there's stunts, and they also call them games too. Either one of those two. And I'm trying to think who like a really good example of somebody is who runs some really really creative stuff. You were talking about the bear formation. If you want to watch some really creative stuff, I would watch Coach Foster against Georgia Tech in 2014, where he involved Kyle Fuller a ton. I would also watch the Ohio State game in 2015. That one was a really good one as well. 2014.
Yep.
Just gave Ohio State absolute fits with going to a bear front. So honestly, with you could dial up any one of Coach Foster's like primo classics, and you'll see some really interesting stuff.
Yep. Yep. He did a great job of, and he did a lot of stuff too out of what we're about to talk about next, cover zero. And it's a really it's a great job of just utilizing fear.
Hmm. Yep.
And basically just seeing the whites of the quarterback's eyes and just really enforcing the issue a lot of times. And so I'll kind of show you what that looks like here. So let's get into some coverages, and I just want to run through just a couple of basic coverages here and just kind of show you kind of vanilla versions of them. And so when we see them and we're talking about plays, hopefully you say, oh, when I say they're in cover 2, you know what I'm talking about. Or
Hmm.
they're in cover 1 here, you know what I'm talking about, right? All right, so cover 0. Bud Foster used this a lot. He kind of known for it, and he would run a lot of blitzes out of cover 0. So when we say cover 0, that means we have 0 free safeties in the backfield. Okay. So again, I'm not even going to worry about drawing the front here because the front is really not
Yep.
what we're concerned with on this. So let's go ahead and get our corner and our free safeties here. We got our Will up tight and our middle backer. Free safeties, our strong safeties up tight. Sam is up tight. And the corner is here. Okay. So if you notice, everybody's uptight. Everybody is accounted for, right? Everybody is inside what they call the box, right? That box is usually the tackles and usually about 8 yards deep. Okay. That's what they call the box. Everybody's inside the box. We have no deep free safeties. So if you have anybody that is a speed burner and you can't cover him one-on-one, you're kind of toast. That's really the only thing that can beat a true cover 0 unless you can get to the quarterback quick now and in a hurry. Okay. Everybody's got an assignment though. Okay. Everybody's got an assignment though. This Mike backer is locked onto the running back. That is his man. If wherever he goes, he's locked on with him. Okay. This free safety here is walked down the line of scrimmage. He's locked on to this slot receiver. Cornerback is locked on to the split on both sides. This strong safety here is locked on to this slot. Now, what that leaves us is essentially 2 free rushers. Okay. And you can mix things up. You could take this Sam linebacker, flip him with the strong safety, bring the Sam linebacker, and the strong safety could pick up the slot. But essentially now I got the Will linebacker coming free and I got the strong safety coming free. I could mix any of those 2 combinations. And so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 down linemen, 5, 6 coming on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 on 5. They are outnumbered.
So a couple of things, since this is so pertinent to Virginia Tech. Number one, you have to have really good defensive backs to be able to do this, because you're basically
Yes.
asking them to cover a guy with absolutely no help. And we'll get into what that help would look like in some of the other delineations. And I think that's a big reason. I know it's a reason that Virginia Tech was able to get such great defensive backs in, because you're saying, hey, you want to challenge, you want to basically have a chance, if you're good enough to get yourself up there in those draft stocks, come here and you're going to be in a position to do so. That is also the flip side of that coin. The reason why, when you go against the Andrew Lucks of the world or some of the really, really accurate quarterbacks in college football, we had some trouble. You think back to the
Mhm.
Stanford game, you think back to some of the other games. Basically, quarterback play has improved so much in college, especially over the last 10 to 15 years, that I don't want to say it's impossible to run this. It's very difficult to run this given some of the quick games that they have. But the success of this depended basically on you getting to the quarterback and the quarterback's inability to make quick and accurate throws. You are completely basically banking on your defensive line, and your extra rushers are going to create so much havoc that your defensive backs are going to be able to basically hold on for those 3.5, 4 seconds before the quarterback is either on the ground or he's throwing it away. So,
I mean,
yeah,
think
it's
about Fernando Mendoza. Miami played a lot of cover zero in the national championship game, and then when he got in trouble, all he had to do was throw that back shoulder,
Mhm.
and it was game over.
And there are not a lot of quarterbacks who can make that throw. That's the difference. I mean, it's
Yep.
not to make a basketball reference here, but it's basically like you live and die by like the last guy. Can you make this shot or can you not make this shot? And for football, it's can you make this throw or can you not make this throw? And in most cases, that's how Coach Foster made his name.
Okay. So now let's move on to cover one. Okay. So the difference between cover zero and cover one is also man coverage. Okay. But now we have one free safety. And I'll show you a couple different variations of this too, where you can have a robber. You can have a robber or robber coverage on this. But in this version that I'm going to show you here, we're going to have our uh, corner is going to be locked up here. We're going to have a strong safety lined up here over our slot. We have another corner locked up over here. Our free safety is going to play deep. Okay. He's going to have our deep coverage here. Okay. We have our Will, our Mike, and our Sam, okay, over here, locked up. Now, so that's just our coverage. Again, I'm not drawing in the line. Okay. Now, with this, you see I drew a tight end here. So actually they're in 11 personnel here. If you remember that from last time from our discussion, 11 personnel, one tight end, one running back. Okay. Um, the Sam linebacker is going to be locked up man to man on this tight end. Okay. The cornerback locked up here on the split. Cornerback locked up on the split. This strong safety lined up here on this slot. Now, Will linebacker here is going to be responsible for this running back. I have one free safety here. He's playing deep center field. Okay. That means nothing is ever get behind him. Okay, we do this with their guy. That means nothing can get behind him. He on the pre-snap before anything else, he is backpedaling. He's taking his steps. He has got his eyes on the quarterback. He is just reading his eyes. So if anything goes downfield, he's just playing center field, making a play on the ball. We had Cam Chancellor, Kaishan Jarrett. We had some great guys that were just fantastic at playing that deep free safety center field spot. But here again, take a look at this. Think about this. We have 4 down linemen and a Mike linebacker. Okay, on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're even. Okay, and our guys are going to be way more athletic than those 5 that we got coming. So now we're even 5 on 5. So now we're pushing and driving, getting to the quarterback with one free safety high. So it's going to be the responsibility of the receivers now to force themselves open. A lot of teams would run this against us this year. What they would do is they would run what was called a robber coverage. This strong safety would start here, and this free safety would actually start over here. And at the snap of the ball, he would rotate here, he would rotate here. Okay. And that's that robber coverage that I was talking about. So, and again, so what they would do is they would line up, they were thinking that it would be that looked like cover two, which we're going to talk about here
Hmm.
in just a second. And so it looks like cover two to the quarterback, and then at the snap of the ball, he rotates down and it picks him up, and now it's cover one, and they're playing man when they think it's zone, and it's a completely different read for the quarterbacks and the receivers, and that's why we got in a lot of trouble.
Hmm.
So, and again, so that tripped us up a lot last year. So that's the variation of cover one that you can get into with that robber call. So you can actually disguise it, rotate everything back into that one high shell.
The only other thing that I'll point out on this is, or another variation, is anytime you have a running quarterback, you saw that's a lot with Dax Hollifield or Alan Tisdale, is if we're running a spy, instead of having the one extra hitter, your Mike linebacker is actually accounted for the quarterback. So if you have a running quarterback, that Mike linebacker, his responsibility basically is he's playing quote unquote coverage against the quarterback and accounting for him in the run game.
Yes.
So one other variation.
And to go along with that, what they'll do in this case is that they cross read. And so the Mike linebacker will actually read this running back going across, and the will pick up the quarterback going across the other way. They'll cross read them because chances are in that mesh they're very
Hmm.
rarely staying in line with one another,
Hmm.
right? So they're as this running back is going across, this Mike linebacker is picking him up, and this will linebacker is tracking this way. So we're cross reading those guys.
This is why, I mean, for somebody who's just kind of wrapping their head around football, this is why it's so important why do your job is so constantly picked up on, especially with cover zero and cover one. It takes one guy to try to do somebody else's job or get the incorrect call, and you got somebody running naked down the sideline. So everybody's got a responsibility. Um, everybody has a key. Everybody has something that they need to do. As redundant and silly as that sounds, but that's why you end up in situations like you see guys running down the field without anybody covering them.
So all right, so this is going to be the first time we get into a zone look. Okay, so this is a cover two. All right, cover two. It sounds simple. It's really one of the trickiest coverages that you can run because of where things have to break off for the cornerbacks. Okay, so if you notice, I'm drawing the cornerbacks a little bit further off the ball, okay, than they were when they were playing man. So if they're playing man, usually they're playing pressed up right on the receivers, okay? When they're playing in zone, that's one indicator that you can tell what coverage a defense is in. If they're playing man, they're lined up, they are square on the receiver, and they're chest to chest and hip to hip with them. If they're playing zone, they're usually opened up about 3/4, and their chest is actually towards the ball. And you can kind of tell that they're kind of giving up the inside. They're giving themselves up to the inside because right before the ball's snapped, they're actually going to try to bail a little bit and get a cheat on their back pedal. Okay, so that's one way you're going to be able to tell as a quarterback whether or not they're in man or zone in your pre-snap reads. Okay, so corners are playing a little off here. Okay, I got my free safety and I got my strong safety, and they're playing high at about 12 to 14 yards. This is why it's called cover two, because we have two high safeties. Okay. Um, Now, I have my Will linebacker here. I have my Mike, and I have my Sam linebacker here. Now, so now if we look at this coverage, looks very similar to that cover one that I showed that right before you got into that robber look, right? So, so now we get into this, look here, and let's talk about what everybody's responsibilities are, right? First and foremost, the reason why it's called cover two is because this free safety and this strong safety are all responsible for one half of the field. If you drew a line down the middle of the field, they're responsible for that half of the field deep. Nothing can get past them on that half of the field. That is their job. That's their responsibility. Okay. Now, these linebackers here are all responsible for what's called a hook/curl zone. Okay. They're hook curl zones. The Sam linebacker is going to break at a 45-degree angle, and that's their hook curl zone. This Will linebacker is going to break off and get into his hook curl zone over here. This Mike linebacker is going to take a few back pedal steps and get into his hook curl zone. Not quite so deep, and we'll talk about a variation of cover two here in just a second. Now, these cornerbacks, here's what makes cover two so tricky. There is a hole in the zone, and this is what good quarterbacks can pick up on. This is what good offensive coordinators can pick up on. There is a hole in these zones that's about right there on either side of the field. So if you are a receiver and you can run a good corner route right there, or a good smash concept where you can get to that corner, you can actually hit a lot of stuff in those little pockets right there. Because here's what the corner is supposed to read. The corner has got to be able to cover the flats. Okay, that's his responsibility. So when we say the flats, that is the area of the field. Okay, that's about 5 to 8 yards past the line of scrimmage. Okay, that's kind of this area here on both sides of the field. That's the flats. Sorry, I'm scribbling a lot on the field. Hopefully you guys can decipher it as I'm going along. So that's the flats. So if a receiver that they're trailing gets past the flats or looks like they're going past the flats, they are actually taught to let them go and let this deep half free safety pick him up, or let this hook curl linebacker come over and pick him up. It takes a lot of trust to be able to take a wide open receiver and just let him go, because he has to break off and come over here and pick up this route that's breaking off in the flat. Okay, so it's really, really, really takes a lot of trust to be able to run this. So again, this zone is really, really tricky to run, and it takes a lot of reps and a lot of coverage and a lot of trust to be able to do it over and over and over again. Now, the one variation of this and another place where you can get destroyed is right here in the middle. Now, a bunch of years ago, Monty Kiffin, yes, that Monty Kiffin, Lane Kiffin's dad, created this Tampa 2 coverage that now a lot of people use, where instead of just taking a few steps back and getting in this hook curl zone, this middle linebacker essentially turns 180 degrees and sprints back about 15 yards and gets into this deep, deep hook curl zone and takes away that zone in the middle of the field. So it's a unique variation of the cover two where you drop into that that Tampa 2 look, and now you have that middle linebacker. In order to do that, you got to have a middle linebacker that's got to be tough to be able to stop the run and have wheels in order to be able to get back there and play that deep zone.
Mm-hmm.
Anything to add, Billy?
No.
Yep. All right, so let's move on. We'll get into, I got 2 more that I really want to show. I know we're starting to run a little long here. The next one is cover 3, and then there's a variation of cover 3 that I want to show off of that. So cover 3, let's get that one up here. Beautiful. All right, now cover 3, you guessed it right, is a 3 deep zone. Okay, where we now have divided the field into thirds on defense, and we have 3 people responsible for a deep third of the field. Okay, we have then portioned out the lower half of the field and divided that up between our secondary level linebackers. Okay. So again, we got our corners out here. We have our free safety up high. And again, it's an odd number. We have a single high coverage. Okay. So when we see our one single high safety, it's either going to be cover 1 or cover 3. Okay. More times than not, unless they are rolling stuff
Yep.
down. That's a pre-snap read that's usually a quarterback can make. Okay. So let's see. We have a strong safety out here, walk down over top of the tight end. We got our Sam linebacker. We got our Mike. We have our Will over top of the slot. Okay. Now, we see this layout here, and cover 3 means we have deep thirds. Now, who's got the deep third? Obviously the free safety in the middle. He's got one of them. He's got a deep third. This cornerback here, again, he's opened up to the middle of the field. He's going to bail because he's got to get way deep. He's got deep third responsibility here. Okay. So does this guy. Boom. 1/3. So we have 2 cornerbacks that have completely bailed. They have deep third responsibility. Now, this strong safety, okay, if he sees run, his job is to move in and stop the run. Obviously, right? That's his job as a strong safety. But if he reads pass, his job is to cover this zone in the flats. Okay. That's his job. He's got flat responsibility. Same with this Will linebacker here. He's got flats responsibility. Okay. Which means I now have 2 linebackers in the middle that are dropping back into their hook curl zones. Cover 3 is a relatively easy coverage. It's something that is one of the first coverages I taught at the high school level. It's something that, because the outside linebackers have flats, the middle linebackers have hook curl, everybody else has a deep third. It's very simple to understand. There's no crazy concepts there. Okay. The things that get tricky with it, if you have a team that likes to run 4 verticals is your beater on this. Okay. Because obviously you have deep thirds. If you send 4 deep and you only have 3 guys back there, that's your math equation, right? 4 verticals is your beater there. Crossing routes also are your beaters here. If you have guys that can run good crossing routes, there's also windows there available. So again, cover 3 screens and draws. Screen games work very well against cover 3. Okay, because you're thinking about your quarterbacks bailing, they're out of there. Your free safeties out of there. You got your linebackers; they're getting out of the equation. You're releasing all of your linemen. Boom, dump it off to your running back on a screen. Off to the races.
Another one you can run as a bubble. I can't remember specifically if Florida State was in a bubble the year that we played them in 2018, but it seemed like for the entire first quarter of that game, we just ran bubble screen, bubble screen, bubble screen, bubble screen until Florida State finally, after they gave up what seemed like 150 yards on them, moved their cornerbacks up. I feel like they were in cover 3 the entire time, or they at least had their corners playing super deep.
Now, there's a variation of cover 3. And that happens when, hang on, let me get rid of this because I got to shift something over here. When a team runs trips, okay, when a team has a trips formation, you can run a variation of cover 3, and it's called cover 8, okay? And this is a variation of cover 8 here, or excuse me, a variation of that. Now, we have our corners out here, and I got my free safety. Okay, got my strong, got my Mike, I got my Will, got my Sam. Okay, now here's where it gets a little tricky. Okay, I still have this guy. is it's still going to be divided into thirds, but it's going to be divided into a weird mix of three. Okay. This free safety now has half of the field. Okay. This free safety here, okay, or excuse me, this strong safety here has a quarter. This cornerback has a quarter. Okay. So you're dividing it into a quarter, and then half of the field. Okay. So you have quarter, quarter, half deep. Okay. Now you have this Sam linebacker here that's going to cover this flat zone out here. Okay. And then you have your Mike linebacker here and your Will linebacker that's got your hook curl zones. Now, your cornerback is locked in man to man on the single receiver. So you're running cover. You're running. So we call this cover 8 against anybody that ran trips. Okay. The one thing again, there are a couple things that can beat this, but it does defend you against if someone were to run verticals with their trips bunch here. You are covered against that. But again, you got your hook curls there. You got your flat zones protected, and then you're running man against your single receiver side. So again, another variation of cover 3 against somebody who lines up in a trips formation or a 3-by-1 formation there. All right, last one I'm going to go over for today. I promise. And this one is, again, it's a another way to, I guess you could call it a variation of cover 2. It's kind of its own thing in a way. And it's cover 4. And again, something that you teach on, it's kind of a day 1 install, especially at the high school level, but it's something that everyone needs to kind of understand and learn. Corner, strong safety, free safety, Will, Mike, Sam. Okay. Now, in this particular set, you see we got a twin set here. Okay. We're running cover 4. We are trying to prevent anything from getting over top of our head, right? We don't want anything beating us deep, including 4 verticals. Okay. So what we're looking at here is essentially this cornerback, this and so some people actually call this quarters coverage. You may hear it call it quarters coverage before. Cover 4. Cornerback, free safety, strong safety, other corner. They all have 1/4 of the field. Okay. So they all have 1/4. They divide it into quarters. They have responsibility for that deep quarter of the field. Now, the Will linebacker here, okay, they're dropping to hook to curl. Okay. Then they are working to flat. Okay. So they're dropping back into their hook curl zone. And then if anything breaks off into the flat, they then work down to that flat cover. So there is a hole there for a little bit. So this is the defense where when they say, okay, we're going to give up everything underneath and then rally and tackle, this is normally what that defense is. Okay. Same thing for this.
And
Sam linebacker.
you'll hear when somebody talks about the responsibility, they'll say the Will is supposed to have curl to flat. When they're saying that, that's essentially what that responsibility means. And it's taken up a lot of field too. So as simple as this one is, you have to have linebackers that are able to adjust really quickly, and you also have to pursue the ball.
Yes, you got to be able to rally and tackle. Yeah, and you got to have guys that can tackle in space. And so this middle linebacker here, he's obviously going to have running back responsibility primarily in case they run a draw here or they run anything here. But then he's going to be dropping back and then looking for anything crossing his face. Obviously here. So, but again, this is some basic vanilla coverages here. We went over 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 8, which is a variation of 3, and 4. Okay. So we went over just some basic coverages. And so hopefully you guys have an idea of what you're seeing out there.
Let us know what else you'd like to see and what else you'd like to dive into. I'm hoping that we can do a dive into the bear coverage that we did with Coach Foster. I'm hoping that we can dive into maybe some adjustments that you see and how exactly you'll attack some of these different types of defenses. But Coach Holmes, this was fantastic.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about any of this until today. So
Basically the idea, guys, is that we want to go through some old Hokie games. And so if you have drop it in the comments. If you have an old Hokie game or a play that's one of your favorites, like if you love the 95 UVA comeback win and you want to see the draw up of Druckenmiller to Holmes for the final touchdown, or if you want to see, hey, how are we able to Antonio Banks pick off the pass and run it back for the touchdown when he almost got tripped by that trainer? Or, how did Brian Still run back the punt in the Sugar Bowl in 95? Whatever it is, if there's something, a big play in Hokie history that you want to see, leave it in the comments. And that's what we'll do here with these in the off season.
Hokie Hitter Chalk Talk, episode number 2 in the bank. Coach Holmes, it is always a pleasure. I got a pack for Montana, and let's beat UVA on Friday or Saturday or whichever day it is. Take care, everybody.
Hey.